Okay, so my name is Jean-Marc Couffin. I'm French, as you can tell. I'm an architect. I'm not doing much architecture these days, like many of you, I guess. I'm a senior BIM specialist. What it says is that at BIM One, what I'm doing is getting all the new technology in my brain and spit it out to all the experts of the team, basically. So I'm a tinkerer. I like to code and do a lot of things. Um, if you have any question, just ask. Don't wait me to finish my sentence or anything. Just ask. Don't worry about me. About the objectives, I don't want to sound that much. Not so much. About the objective, I want you to get to know a bit more pyRevit, how powerful it is, how easy it can be to get into it, how easy it will be eventually to get to learn Python if you don't know it, and how to make a simple toolbar. Toolbar meaning you need to have tools behind those icons, obviously. And also, I'm going to show you quickly how to get that toolbar across your organization. There are many ways to do that, so I'll go with one way, but there's some other source of information where you can find that and get to know that. Okay. If you need the final code of everything, that will be the address to get that. There's a handout next to it. The handout is not the one I did here with the BIM Coordinator Summit. I presented that specific topic at Build NA in June, so I didn't redo the handout, but basically you have everything to get going from ground up. Are you good so far? Yeah? Okay. Who I am, nobody cares, and I have only an hour, so if you want to read it, just go through everything. So pyRevit, first, that's a framework. What it means is that it's not only a set of tools that you would see in Revit, it's also a bunch of tools to build your own tools to go faster with the Revit API. That's the daddy of pyRevit. That's Ehsan, nice guy. If you want to get into it, I suggest you go and connect to the community first, maybe, and get started from there. pyRevit is relying on the Revit API to be able to communicate with Revit. There's a very nice website. It's apidocs.co, where you can find the Revit API documentation, and where you see that very small button there. That's your best friend, actually. That's the rest is interesting, but that's your best friend because it's going to give you some samples of code. So whenever you're looking for, let's say, how to get the warnings of my model, that's very basic stuff. You can click on that. Once you found the get warning method, you click on that and you'll find a bunch of code in C#, some in Python, and also in Visual Basics. So that will be pretty easy to get started and get to build your first piece of code from there. There's a nice documentation for pyRevit. It contains a lot of things. Not everything might be meaningful to you at first, but you'll see that as you get going, it will get you much further than you expected. So enough talking, and let's get hands-on, almost hands-on. If you want to build a toolbar in Revit, you're expected to have some kind of structure in the toolbar you're going to build. So you'll need to understand that this is going to be a tab in terms of the pyRevit framework, and this is going to be a panel with a name on it, and after that you'll get a bunch of different buttons. Here I put only 3, actually 2 of them. The stack is just a group of 2 buttons, and the pull down is the one with an arrow, meaning you can get some extra button down to it, and the push button is just the basic one, the 101 guy. Once there, to get the toolbar going, what you will do is to build a structure, a folder structure. So if I show you on my computer, give me a sec. On my messy computer, I'm going to show you in VS Code. Do you guys code, actually? How many of you don't code? Okay, half, I would say. Okay, cool. So that tool is basically a text editor on steroids to get you going with programming. It has a lot of features that helps you program things, code things properly. One of them being the highlighting of whatever code you're typing. So let's say I'm going to go in one of the code I've been doing here. So that would be one script. And from there, you see that Visual Code is going to give you colors everywhere, and that will help you get the structure of the code itself and try to be able to understand it better. One of the things you need to know, all the green stuff here, it's basically comments. So it's not doing anything in the code besides doing the documentation itself. So talking about the structure, and I need to show you my Revit toolbar. OK, let me open that one. So you see I have a lot of plugins, tools, whatever installed. That's what I'm doing all day, so I don't uninstall everything all the time. So that would be your pyRevit basic toolbar. That's the typical one. And from there, on my computer, I have a couple of toolbars. Some I built for my team. Like all these tools here, they are either scripts in Python or Dynamo scripts as well, because that works. They could be C# as well, DLL, compiled ones. And you could link it to some URL to go on the web. You can link it to pretty much anything you have on a computer or on the web from there. The toolbar we're going to be working on is here. So you see it's pretty basic. It says build, should say BCS, but I didn't put the effort into that one. You'll see you have like a bunch of buttons with very nice icon I took the time to put. And basically, when you go in VS Code and you start building a set of folders here, the build tab that is here is whatever you have here at the top in Revit. So if you name it whatever you want, let's say I would want to rename it BCS, whatever. That would, after I refresh, after I reload and push it back to GitHub, because that's what I've been doing, it would rename that specific tab BCS. After that, you have inside that folder, you can have a set of panels. So here you see I have 1, 2, 3, 4 panels. Those are the ones you can find here. And by the way, if you don't know that in Revit, you can grab them like that and move them around. And something people, that's some of the things that people don't know in Revit. Revit, it's pretty flexible up to a point for that. And if you need to put it back, you just drag it and drop it on top, and it's going to go wherever. So once you have the panel folder set up here, you'd get the structure for the type of buttons, the update, the dash teen. That's something I did during the conference last time, and for build panel. And from there, inside of that, if I go back to the presentation itself, you'll see that I have the tab on top. Whoops, not so far. The tab on top, the panel, and then I can put whatever I want. I can go with the buttons directly, and from there, I could go with a push button. So what is important for pyRevit to be able to build all that is to get the dot push button written properly. You can write whatever you want before that, and that's going to display properly. But if you don't have the dot push button and then the dot panel on top and then the dot tab on top, you won't get a toolbar in itself. So you really need to build the structure of each and every folder that you have here. So let me go back here, let me open it, blah, 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 open. So let's see, nice pictures. Let me put it bigger. So going from the Windows environment, it's going to be easier for you to understand maybe. Let me make it bigger as well. OK. So you have the whatever name tab, dot tab. Then after you have several panels, then you can have a push button, for example. And in that push button, the 101 thing that you need to have, the bare thing that you need to have, would be the script.py. If you don't have a script in a push button, you don't have a button. That's all you need. The script can be empty, and you can have an empty set of buttons to work with, but basically that's what you would need. That's something that I'm doing for myself, actually. Like you see, I have a tab for prototyping. Whenever I want to do quickly an iteration of a script and a function, I can just go there, click Alt, and click on the button. It's going to open the location of the script, and then I can open the script. And here, if I change that one, that would be the 13 one. And if I type, let's say, print, hi, BCS people, I save it, that's it. Going back to Revit, clicking on that one, and then I get my hello world kind of thing. So you see, there's no compiling, no questions of DLL. You see how much time it took me to make it happen. And you can get things together very, very quickly with pyRevit once you have that set up. So if you guys want to install, too many windows as usual, if you guys want to install the toolbar itself to start with, you don't want to build all the structure of the folder right now because we have 45 minutes left. And what you can do is you can use that code here to install the toolbar. Let me do it with you. So if you have pyRevit installed, obviously that's the prerequisite. So once you have pyRevit installed, you can go in the command line. Sorry, my computer is in French. You'll have to live with that. So the command line, it appears. You can copy paste the code that was on the first page of the GitHub here. GM Couffin, pyRevit, da, 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 da. If you look for GitHub GM Couffin, you'll find me, and then you can find the repo here. It's open source, so you can just have a look at it. And you go down that page, and you just copy that code, that piece of code. There's a small button usually that should appear here to copy it. And from there, you paste it. You just need to modify here your GitHub users. That would be mine for you first. I won't go into the details of the use of GitHub itself. It's explained actually in the handout quite a bit. And from there, you just press enter. And you should have the toolbar installed. The same toolbar that is here, you will have everything appearing in Revit if you have pyRevit installed beforehand, obviously. Is somebody trying to do it now? Yeah? Does it work? Good. It's always like that. Do you have pyRevit installed? Yeah? Show me. Give me a sec. Okay. pyRevit. Okay, you didn't change the username here. Here, you'll tap my name. It's open, so no worry. Couffin. Please don't pronounce my name in English. Couffin sounds bad. It's Couffin if you want to pronounce it properly. And then you press enter. If you want to say it nicely. If you're not nice, just call me a fucking coffee. And now it's installed. It's supposed to be installed. So let's check. Do you have Revit installed? Here. Okay, you're like me. You have many things installed, I guess. And you might need some of the installs of pyRevit don't work like mine. You just need to reload here, actually, and it should work after a minute. That's just a button. I'll show that on my computer later on for the other people, but you see it's uploading everything, it's refreshing everything that needs to be refreshed. It's going to refresh the UI in Revit itself. And it's going to tell you, you see starting PyBuildNA, that's the one I've been working with. And there's a starting script that tells you something just to show that it's happening, that there's something happening. And then you'll see here, you're the same as me. Lucky you. So there's at least one person with a functioning. It's you too? Okay. Usually I don't go around the room and everything, but if you have only 2 people trying, that's okay.
I wasn't connected to internet, I couldn't follow, so until
yeah, change the username. what I show in the piece of code, there's your GitHub username. That's because if you fork GitHub, my repo, you will probably have your username instead of mine. But that's still okay. And then you just type enter. It's going to work out. It's going to take about a minute, depending on your Wi-Fi connection.
Okay.
And
Then
then,
it will
then after
show
it
up here.
stops flashing, like with the
Yeah,
here you
okay.
see, it's telling you it's okay. I can even check using the pyRevit command, pyRevit env. And then it's going to tell you if something else is installed. It takes time the first time, but after that, then you have the py build na whatever install extension.
Okay.
And from there, you go to pyRevit. Where is it? Oh, you have BIM One installed. Oh, you don't have pyRevit installed. Oh, you have pyRevit CLI maybe installed. You need to install pyRevit. Just go on the website and it's going to work after that. It's not going to take you too long. Okay. So let me show you in the command line some of the stuff again, maybe, that will help. Okay. Command line, maybe. Can you see that well, actually? Or let me zoom in. You know you can zoom in with pretty much every software now, with control and the wheel. So just pasting that thing from the repo in GitHub, going back to your GitHub user, whatever, and just change it to your name if you have my repo forked. If not, just use that one, and that should work. Then you press enter. It's going to work for like a minute or two max. Not even a minute, actually, 30 seconds. And then after that, you're done, it's installed. If you don't see the toolbar, you might need to go into the pyRevit tab here and just press reload. And what it's doing is going through all the pyRevit code and extensions as well. Extension meaning toolbars, and refreshing it. So it's going to remake the UI for pyRevit, for my set of toolbars for in-house work, for another lab I gave, for build, and for prototyping. All of these are made with pyRevit framework. So pretty much everything I have installed, actually. And if you want to check here, oops. If you want to check that you have the extension installed, you can still do it in the command line. That's where pyRevit is pretty powerful because you don't need to have a user interface to get to work with it, basically. So pyRevit environment, env, you press enter, and you'll see everything you have installed with it. And in the attachment, you will see the version of Revit, or in the clones here, the versions of pyRevit that you have installed. What it is attached to, Revit 22, 23, 21, whatever. That means that you can install pyRevit for a specific version of Revit. You don't need to have it for every version if you don't want to. And you can detach it on the go. And after that, you see installed extension. Those are all my toolbars that I have installed here. So the BIM One toolbar, the EF tool, the lab, the prototyping, build NA, whatever. Okay? And all that you can look at it with pyRevit env. That's a good tool to cross-check if it installed properly. That's the first step. If you don't see it in Revit, you just do that first. Then you'll see your extension. If your extension is located there, that means you're almost good to go. You'll just need to check maybe your pyRevit installed, that it's properly not well done, but that's it. Okay, let's go back there. You good? No question? Speaking too fast, too bad? No? A question? Go ahead. It didn't work? Okay. Second. I don't go out of my cave so much, so I'm exercising myself here.
Yeah, I changed my name here.
Oh, yeah, but you don't have forked the GitHub, so you just put JMCOUFFIN instead.
Yeah.
So let me try. Okay. So if I'm going back, you can go back in history with the arrows in command line. Here. And then you just put my name everywhere. Press enter. Oops, I mistyped it maybe. No, that should be good to go. Oh no.
Could be because it's inside of C3 instead of the computer.
Maybe. It should work. Again. That's weird. pyRevit extend UI, blah, blah, blah. No. pyRevit ENV. Sorry, your downtime. Okay, it should be fine. Let me paste. You probably pasted, right? Or you typed it?
I pasted from the email.
Oh, you don't have it. Oh, fuck. I'll come back. That's where the guy is just pressing the on-off button of somebody's computer instead of the escape. That's a nice one. I'll come back. I'll show you that later. Okay. So the toolbar itself. Let's go through all of the buttons so that you understand the structure of it. This is a sample of the sets of buttons that you can create. In this sample, you have a good taste of it. You don't have every type of button that you can create, but you have most of them, the most important ones. So the URL button, guess what it's doing? It gives you an access to something on the internet. So obviously here I put the wrong link because Sam changed it. Oh, come on. But basically what you can do here, if you open the bundle.yaml, that's a type of file that pyRevit is heavily relying on. You can change that one. You can put, let's put Google. That's an easy one. .com. Just save it. You see I'm not even using the VS Code to edit it, just a text editor, basic one. And one thing you will notice, it's not going to work on the first time for URL button. For the URL button, you need to press the reload button because it needs to refresh and read again the bundle file.yaml that I showed you. So here I'll just say yes, it's going to refresh everything in the meantime. And the bundle.yaml, if we look at it, you see the structure, you just need to type hyperlink, double dots. How do you say that in English actually? I don't know. Yeah, double. Okay, and then a space, and then whatever name you want. Oh, I put a refresh one. No. And whatever name of website that you want to have to get it to work. Let me show you on another toolbar that I did that as well. I have a how-to section for the team I'm working with. Oh, that's my internet is not working. Nice. Okay. No internet? Okay, no internet, so I'll do with that. It worked before. Whatever. So you'll bear with me. It's going to a web address, a URL, and it's supposed to open it for you. So that's one of the buttons that is possible. The second type of button, the preferred one usually, the push button. So if we go inside the structure of the folder, so except for that, the meme.jpg, it serves no purpose other than to have fun. You have three things. You have the script.py, you have an icon, and you have a bundle.yaml. So the script obviously is where your function is going to lie. So if I open it and look at it, I'm importing some modules from pyRevit. One module is script, the other one is Revit. I'm getting the output window. I'm closing the previous output windows. I'm centering the new one, and then I'm outputting in Markdown this text and that image. And after that, I'm saying something new using the following Revit build, and I'm getting the Revit build like so. And then it self-destructs after 15 seconds. So let's try it. Push button. So you see it's displaying the text with a certain way of putting it bold in titles and then a picture. You can use a picture, but you can put something else. You can pretty much bring everything you would be able to bring on a website, because it's basically doing the same thing as a website here when it's displaying something. So I'm putting that back again. And you see, you're using the following Revit build. So let's say a use case that I'm using with some clients. You want to make sure that every user is using the latest build of Revit on every computer, because you're more of an IT guy and you want to make sure that they install always the latest to get everybody on the same page for a project. Well, you see, that takes you only this function with pyRevit to be able to get the build of Revit the person is using actually. So every time that person is going to press that button, you can collect that build somewhere. So let's say I could collect it in a CSV, in a database online, in whatever I want, because it's Python, so you can send it to pretty much everything you want. You could send an email, a Slack notification, whatever. Okay, so that's fairly easy to get somewhere very quickly with the basics of pyRevit. And when you dig down into the modules of pyRevit, you'll see that there's a lot of functions. If you press F12 in VS Code, you'll see there's a certain structure in the code here. You'll see you can interact. You have pre-built function to interact with BIM 360, with the events in Revit, whenever somebody is creating something, removing something. So that means you could collect every time somebody is deleting something from a model, for example. That would be a bit too much, but you could. You could make things happen whenever somebody is opening a file. And maybe when that person opens the file, you would be able to collect the name of the file, the person who opened it, the Revit version, send it to somewhere, to a CSV file, to whatever database you want, and be able to manage that with a single function within the toolbar that you built. So that's for the script structure. After that, you need an icon. The icon needs to have some specifics. I'm using pretty much the same workflow every time. I'm going on icons8.com to grab them. 96 by 96, that's the number of pixels. I still don't have internet, obviously. No cable. That's nice. Let me try to disconnect again, whatever. No internet, okay, whatever. So you need to go on icons 8, and then from that website you can give pretty much the number of pixels that you want for your icon, and you have a big bank of icons that would help you out to make it look good. So you see you can find some Star Wars stuff, whatever. You can have a giraffe if you want, or you can have some pretty boring stuff like I did on this one to make things more clear for everybody. Oh, and I forgot to plug my computer. That's even worse. Okay, while I'm plugging my computer, you can use Dynamo scripts within the button itself. So it would basically be a push button as well, like the one I showed you, but instead of a script.py, you need to have a script.dyn, Dynamo extension. And you would need to open that script in Dynamo, make it run on automatic instead of running like on pressing the button. And then after that, if I can find a plug, after that you would be able to make things happening with the Dynamo script. So let me show you that. The structure is pretty much the same. You still have a bundle, an icon, and a script, but the script is a Dynamo script. If I open that Dynamo script just in a regular text editor, and if I look for the run type, you'll see that it's set on automatic. So that's something you can do directly in the text editor. You don't have to open Dynamo, wait for all the packages to load and everything. It's always kind of a pain to use Dynamo if you have a lot of extension attached to it. So usually it's in manual, and you just change it to automatic, you save it, you're good to go. Let's see if we are good to go in Revit. So it's going to take a while on my computer to run because I have a bunch of stuff in Dynamo. Sometimes I'm prototyping stuff in Dynamo, so I have everything installed. So what it's doing, it's running Dynamo in the background. So it's basically opening Dynamo, but you just don't see it. Opening your Dynamo file, and then running it. So that helps you up to a point, depending if you have a UI in your Dynamo script. Because if you don't have a UI, people won't know what's happening. Basically, they'll just press a button, wait for like a minute, and then something happened, and they don't know what happened precisely. So if you want to build a UI, you will need to build that UI in Dynamo. So you could use the data shapes nodes, for example. That's a good source to do that. But I suggest you just do it with pyRevit because it's going to be so much faster once you start scripting in Python. So it's running, it's coming, it's slow like me. Okay. Yeah.
I just want to be sure I understand everything correctly. So the things you've been describing, starting with the tab, the panel, the stack, the
Yeah.
structure of the application, and the toolbar, this is all specific to the pyRevit. So it's a framework.
Yeah.
You need to install the pyRevit.
You need to install pyRevit to be able to do something. You can build a UI, you can build a toolbar in Revit, and you can use the framework of pyRevit to interact more directly with the Revit API. If you could use the Revit API in Python, that's no issue. You could import from Autodesk, import Revit API, whatever. But the thing is, the built-in function inside of it are kind of a pain in the ass to work with. Within pyRevit, you have already a set of functions that works already. So let's say I want to get a family by name. There's already something built inside of the pyRevit modules that is exactly named like that. So you use that function, you put the name of the family, you find it, you have it already. You don't need to go through the whole process of filter the element collector, grab all the family instances or types, go through, check the name, filter it down, give me the element or the element ID and whatever. So the structure is kind of painful to work with when you are not like a coder like me. I'm not a coder, so I'm learning on top of that. So is that correct? You good?
Yeah, and pyRevit does not produce any limitations regarding the interpreter, right? So you can choose any distribution of the file.
You can.
Because, for example, before, on previous versions of Revit, if you had Dynamo, you could launch only a specific Iron Python distribution
Yeah.
inside the line.
Yeah, that's one limitation. The Revit API in Dynamo is open to two types of Python right now. Iron Python 2.7, if I'm right, and CPython, whatever version. I think that's 3 point something. The CPython is not very friendly quite yet. It's not working quite yet, but it's getting there. So basically, you're stuck with Iron Python 2.7. That means that you cannot get all the nicest, latest module on the market yet. But there's a big but. You can make it happen anyway. You could copy that module set locally, import it, and get it to work somehow. Kind of a pain. I'm saying you could, but you can make it happen outside of Revit also. I have just let me finish on that's the UI from DataShape built inside the Dynamo script I have, and it's collecting all the Revit templates and whatever you want to attach to the Revit templates, include, and you can just run it and you're good to go. And that UI is built in Dynamo. So going back to the Iron Python thing, what I did recently, I'm working on some technological preview thing, and I built a tool where I had access to the requests module to interact with the internet. but it was an old one because Iron Python 2.7 supports just an older version. So I couldn't do everything I wanted with that. So what I did in the code, I did send a request to launch a command line to run another Python script behind. So from there, I'm running a Python script with Python 3.10, whatever, with whatever module I want, without any issue. So I'm just like splitting like a schizophrenic person. Everything you're doing with pyRevit mostly is going to be done in Revit, but you can still interact outside of Revit with the world in general. You're not stuck with the Revit API, you're not stuck with Iron Python 2.7. So if there's, let's say, you want to use matplotlib, which is one of the modules that helps you like draft some dashboards, like pie chart, whatever, you could use it, but just outside of Revit. You need to send the script to launch another script to run outside of Revit, and it's going to display on your computer anyway. It's going to work this way. So there's this process, it works. It's kind of a big thing when if you're only starting. Let me show you at the end of the script what I'm doing. That's a longer one. Basically what I'm doing, you see, I'm importing the OS, which means I'm going to interact. Let me zoom in. I'm going to interact with my computer OS, and I'm going to launch the command line. I'm going to launch a Python script that is located here and that I named properly this time, process outside, so that I'm doing a process outside of the Revit environment through that script that is hosted in Revit. So one big note for you guys, if you don't know what you're doing with Python yet, just double check what you're doing a couple of times. You can do a lot of bad things with Python, like a lot. To delete the complete computers and servers of your company takes one small line of maybe 20 characters. So be careful with what you're doing. Don't remove, delete folders in Python unless you're really comfortable with it, right? That's something. The other thing, if you're installing something on your computer that contains some Python script, like I made you do it on your computer, you need to trust the person that did that code before, right? So you need to make sure you trust that person and that the code, you can take a look at the code inside of it and make sure that there's no funky stuff happening, right? So there's some funky stuff on the toolbar. So you will see every time you open Revit, you will see a pop-up with a picture and everything. You can remove that by just removing the folder under C pyRevit / and then remove the folder. The extension is out, okay? So don't be scared. And you can still email me if you want me to help you do it from afar. No problem. Okay, good. Any more questions from there? No? Okay. So I'm going to go still through some of the buttons, 20 minutes. We're okay with that. There's a nice stuff that I discovered while preparing the presentation 6 months ago. The content button, that's a pretty cool one, actually. That's especially cool when you have an ugly model like that. So you see there's a small black dot next to it. That means there's a second script attached to that same button. So you have one button, but you can execute one or the other inside of it. So I'm going to press on the first one. Do you want to load that family? That's just a warning I did myself with the pyRevit framework. If somebody is trying to load a family bigger than 1 megabyte, I'm checking the size of the family, and I'm telling them 1 megabyte, that might be a bit overkill for what you're doing. And then you can put some Star Wars stuff. So that's a Revit family. So I have a Revit family attached to a button specifically. So let's say you're building a lot of kitchens and you want to have all the cabinetry attached to a toolbar. You could make it happen in the toolbar with that content button. If we look at how it's built, You'll see you have a Star Wars R2D2 and a AT-AT dot underscore content dot RFA or FA. So that's the thing that you need to have in the name of your family. If you don't have that, it's not going to be read by pyRevit as a family for that specific button. So the button needs to be in a folder named content, and you can attach the RFA by just adding content.rfa at the end of the name. And you see I have two families, so that means if I'm pushing on the shift click, shift plus the button, it's going to load that other family, and I can just place my R2D2 whatever friend here all over the place, right? So one button, two functions. And that's possible with every type of button almost. So for the push button, you could do that as well. That means you could attach a second script to that push button. But for the push button, it's a different naming convention behind that. But basically, you can do that with pretty much everything. If you look at my own toolbar, I have quite a few with that. You see I have a small dot there. That's going to tell you that you can use a shift on that one. And I have another one here, for example, shift click. All right. Question? Are you sunk somewhere? No, you're following a bit? Okay. After that content button, I did a quality control one. So this one is just a basic quality control. It's not the full-blown thing that I'm doing myself with all of my clients. But I could shift click on it, see what I'm doing there. It's going to open the type of checks that I want to run. So let's say I want to get the project name and the warnings. I can select. And then I need to run it. So to run it, I don't shift click, I just click on the button. And then it's going to run the check. So I have the sample house, which is the name of not the file, but the title of the project. And I have 3 warnings in this project. And if we look at the code behind, oops. So I have a config.py and I have a CQ quality control underscore script py. So the quality control is grabbing my config file setup, the one I did with a shift click, and then I have a few definitions that goes with the project information, grab the number, project information, grab the name, get the warnings, filter down the warning types by type, and then get the length. LEN is for length. In Python, the length of the description of the warnings. And then I just display the whole thing. So that would be for the script itself, but if you go into the config file, you can have a config file where you're saying, okay, I have a list of checks that I want to run. They are named like that. I'm going to use them in a form, which is a select from list. Everything is built in the pyRevit module. So if you use the form module inside of pyRevit, you'll get access to a select from list and be able to show it, use the list check that is set up here, and then just put the size of the window, whatever, allow for multi-selection and everything. And all the documentation is attached to the function. So if you go through this, you'll see all the help that you need to understand every function of pyRevit behind that. And you usually have a sample for the more complicated ones. So you could just copy paste that one and you would be good to go for a first step. No need to build everything from scratch all the time. And then after that, I'm just running. That's a nice way of running a script. It's just to make sure that the definitions are properly set up, basically. And I'm grabbing the config that I did in a separate file. So going back there, config file with a Python extension and the script itself. This one works with the shift click. This one works with the click itself. And it tells you that just because you have a small black dot there, right? Did you follow along? You good? Many question mark on the forehead, I see.
Folder structure
The config.py will automatically populate the black dot on the button. And if it's inside a push button, content button, I don't know if it's working, but different kind of buttons are working with that config file. The push button being the first one to work with that. So all these 5 samples of types of buttons are there. I would like to show you that on the internet. There's a nice documentation, but in the handout you have all the links for the documentation on every button types is available and how it works with a sample every time. But what I really strongly suggest the first time is just to build something very simple like that. So a tab, a panel, a push button, and then inside of it just a script file. And inside of that one, just print an hello world like that. That's it. That would be your first step to try to make a Python script, to display something and to have a button in pyRevit. One thing I didn't mention, but that is already available in that toolbar. I'm going to go back on top here. So I added a lot of extras here, so I won't talk about all the extras quite yet. If you see here, I have an extension.yaml. This one is a mandatory thing to do to get the toolbar as well, right? So that's one of the things. If you don't do it, you might not see your toolbar. I'm using might because in some cases it may work, but that's one of the things that you need to set up. So you could just copy paste that one and just change everything that you need to change. I commented everything that needs to be changed. So you would need to change your name of extension, maybe the description if you want to have a nice description, the author if you want to change it. You can put a URL for the author profile, a URL for the GitHub where that extension would be hosted, and then website, image, whatever you want. So if you have that thing plus the structure folder with the tab, panel, push button, you're good to go. You have everything you need. Now for deployment. That's the big topic here. In 5 minutes. That's a nice big topic in 5 minutes. Deployment is something that is fairly easy to do with pyRevit. What you need to do, if I'm explaining just the process, well, you need to have a PowerShell script that is set up to install pyRevit first. And then the second part of the PowerShell script would be the installation of the toolbar that you built. That's basically it. That's a 2-part PowerShell thing. I'm going to show you one sample I did here. Deployment here, you will have access to the folder. It's in the GitHub also. The PowerShell needs to be worked out with a bat file. That's something mandatory, but I'll show you that. So the PowerShell itself looks like that. Let me zoom in. So everything that is green is also commenting, so no big deal. I'm telling where I want to install my toolbar. I'm saying where my pyRevit installation file is located. So you will need to change the versioning, obviously, and the location would be set up here. And after that, I'm saying where the pyRevit CLI is installed is located as well. Something I didn't mention at the beginning of the presentation. pyRevit comes in 2 flavors. One is the one with the UI and everything and all the tools in Revit. But there's another one that coexists next to it, is the CLI. CLI standing for Command Line Interface. Now that makes sense, I guess. So that means you have a couple of functions that comes with pyRevit CLI. You can type pyRevit and you will see something happens here. You have a set of functions. So you could get the environment information, get all the clones installed, all the extension, meaning the toolbars in Revit, how it's attached and everything. So with the CLI, you can do a bunch of command line things. But if you're installing pyRevit, the CLI is coming already with it So you don't need to install the tool all the time. You can just install pyRevit and that's good enough. After that, starting the process, setting the file path, saying that I'm using the pyRevit file path, and doing a silent install, Q and N being the argument for the silent install. So if I'm launching that script, it's going to install pyRevit. After that, it's going to install pyRevit CLI. And at the end, it's going to run a command line, the same I gave you at the beginning, that's saying pyRevit, extend pyRevit with an extension, with a toolbar that is of type UI, user interface. Its name can be whatever. You can name it, I don't know, BCS. And then you give the GitHub address. And then you set the destination for installation. So with that script, you have the bat file to launch the script. You could give it to your IT person, and they would be able to put that in the startup script whenever somebody is setting up his computer, opening the computer, that could run, and they would be good to go in one go. It would take like a minute tops to install pyRevit and install the toolbar. So for deployment purposes, it's kind of quick and easy if you use that script. You might want to add checking if pyRevit is already installed, obviously, and everything, but it's not only a one-step thing, but that's a bare minimum example that I gave you here. And yeah, one thing, in the bat file here, that's just a text file as well. You see it's saying launch PowerShell, set the execution policy to bypass. That sounds right. Bypass all security measure of your computer. Yeah. So be careful with what you're bypassing. And then it's saying execute a file that is located in the current folder. That's the current folder code. It's gibberish. And the current folder contains install pyRevit, blah, 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 right? So with that bat file, you're good to go to get a proper deployment like that. Any question on the deployment side? Yeah, with the batch file, you can do pretty much whatever, because you could grab a folder on the network and say install all the Dynamo packages with it, for example. That's something I'm doing with my team, and I should stop talking soon. Stop. No. Okay, that's a nice one. Silence. Thank you. Okay, so you could get either a startup script in pyRevit to do that, or to do that in PowerShell as well. I did, in the toolbar, I did also a startup script. It says what it does. It's basically whenever you're starting Revit, it's going to launch that specific script and do whatever it needs to do. So in this one, what it's doing, it's checking if it can update the toolbar. So it's going to update from GitHub the latest changes of your toolbar. And then after that, it's doing whatever. So it's checking if the date is Thursday, it's going to say something. If it's not Thursday, it's going to say something else. And I added in comments, I added some other funny stuff, like let's say if it's the 1st of April, you can have a April Fool's, whatever, popping up whenever somebody's starting. You could have a pop-up window that says, there's something new that happened in the company. You should check that website address. Please go there, show a picture, show a GIF, show a video in that pop-up within Revit. So the morning the person opens Revit, they can have a direct communication with the company, what it did in the past few days, and you can get to communicate information to your people like that. So that's a very small, nice feature. You wouldn't even need the whole toolbar, actually. You would just need to get the startup.py, and you would be almost good to go. Let me show you what I'm doing. That would be the last thing I'm going to say, and open a 2-minute question session, maybe. Okay, so let me go there. So I have a startup script here. That's a more complicated one, obviously. Don't look at the token, it's private. So it's checking the date, and if it says if it's Thursday, tell your people to fill in their status on Asana, for example. Or if it's April Fool's, do whatever. And it's going to check, inside of it, it's going to check if the Dynamo packages are installed. And one nice feature is that whenever you install the toolbar, you can install the packages of Dynamo as well. So in one go, you manage Dynamo packages and the toolbar. You need an extra step to set up the location of the packages for Dynamo, which I did. That's another piece of code, but very easy to make. But basically, you could manage all that set of information that you manage online on GitHub and deploy it for all your team in one go. And whenever you update a package, every morning they launch Revit, it's updating as well before launching pyRevit and Dynamo. So that means they are always up to date. So that's a very nifty feature, I think. Do you have any question? Some question? I'm still around all day, so don't worry. You still have a way to grab me, even with my computer, with the internet this time.
Among all the tools that you've developed for your team,
Sorry?
among all the tools, the scripts you've developed
Yeah.
for the team, how do you think, which one really boosted the efficiency? Only one.
I have a quality control one, and it is the biggest Dynamo script I did at the beginning. It took me a few months to build it. It's grabbing all the Revit warnings for all the linked files. So you open only one file, you grab the warnings, the names, the levels, the type of levels, all the information. I think I have like 200 points of controls in that one. It's exporting everything to Google Sheet. And then I'm connecting it to a dashboard, whatever it could be, Power BI, or I'm using Google Dashboards actually, which is simple and easy. So that means that whenever they press that button on a federated model, it takes 5 minutes on the biggest hospital I ever opened to grab all the data in one go for every disciplines, and then you have your dashboard ready. So that one is like, you show that to a client, they're like, okay, can you give me that? And usually we do talk with them, but that's a big one. But I have a bunch of stuff. I'm making automated legends, fire escape plans automatically, lots of cleanup stuff, finding in-place families, the bunch of very different stuffs. And I'm doing a lot of tools for specific clients. So in my team, some people work for the Metro Company of Montreal. So they have like a set of tools that they need to work with. So I'm coding that on the side, send it to GitHub, they synchronize, that's it, they're good to go. Like yesterday night, I finished one in 5 minutes. I just adapted for them and they were good to go in 5 minutes. Like very easy to build tools once you literate a bit with Python and with pyRevit modules. Any other question? No, it's to look at the code of pyRevit. That would be the very first step. You go through the very basic tools. You go inside the code and you look at it. And you try to understand in English what it says. Python is pretty easy to understand in a way, especially if you're an English native, not like me. But you go through that and you would do a one-on-one lesson of Python that would help quite a lot, obviously. But for the basics, just use whatever tool is inside pyRevit. Look at the code with the Alt click. You can open the code of pyRevit. It's all open source. And then from there, you can look at it, see how it's built, and change a little bit, save it, click on the same button, and see the result quite easily. And you don't even need to build a toolbar. You already have a toolbar, so you could just do that first. That would be a very easy step. I put a lot of resources in the handout. You should also install these toolbars, PyChilizer and EF Tools. EF Tools, Eric Fritz, I'm doing some advertising for him. He's going to be happy. He's doing a lot of YouTube video right now, and he's doing nice stuff, very nice stuff. He's building fairly nice tools, some amazing ones. And pyRevit, these guys, they are in London. They are consultants, so they can build tools for you as well. They have a nice one, for example, change an in-place family to a loadable one. That's like the pain in the ass thing that every BIM consultant would see in every bloody model, and you can do it with one go and one click. So that's a nice feature, and there's a bunch of nicer features in that one, making some room data sheets and everything. So go dig in, install the latest pyRevit, install the extensions. There's the extensions for pyRevit. I could go here, extension, you can just activate them, and then dig in. That's my best advice. If you have any questions, send me an email, Twitter, whatever. I'll be happy to reply. And I'm 1 minute late, and I'm sorry. Thank you.